So I work up in the Bull Run Watershed. Um, oh, there we go. I work for a group called the Resource Protection Group within the Portland Water Bureau. We do invasive species management, rare plant surveys. We do some reforestation work. We also coordinate on wildfire recovery and work with wildfire crews to kind of make sure that they're using preventative measures so they're not bringing weeds in when they're doing firework. And we do some long-term monitoring as well. The Bull Run Watersheds, it's 102 square miles. It serves about 1 million people in the Portland metro area. It's owned mostly by the Forest Service, and I'm going to show you a map in a second. But also big parts of it are owned by the city of Portland and the Bureau of Land Management. It is a closed watershed, and I'm going to pop this map up here. Hopefully you can see this well. This dark green line around, actually, let me, can you just verify that you can see my cursor on the screen?
Yes.
Okay, good. Okay, so this dark green line is the Bull Run Watershed Management Unit line. So it includes the whole Bull Run drainage, which is this blue dotted line going around the outside, but then it also includes kind of a buffer area of it. It's also an area that we manage in addition to the water supply boundary. So what that means is that not only do we work in the Bull Run watershed, but we work in parts of the Columbia Gorge watershed. We work in parts of over near the Hatfield Wilderness over in here. And on the south side of the watershed, we work in like the Goodfellow Lakes area and around places like the Sandy Ridge Trail and areas that are outside of the physical Bull Run watershed. So in this map, you can see the light green land is owned by the Forest Service. The light blue land's owned by the Water Bureau. And then this yellow land at the very bottom edge and up in the northeast corner is BLM. So we manage cooperatively primarily with the Forest Service. I work very closely with the Forest Service, Mountain Hood Forest Service botanist, and also on occasion with the Columbia Gorge botanist. The first thing that we do, the most thing that we do, and the least I'm going to talk about tonight because it's the least fun, is we do a lot of weed work. For the most part, inside the water supply drainage, we do not use any herbicides. So all of our weed work in this area is hand pulling. And we have a pretty extensive data set that goes back the same age as the program, about 15 years. You can see on this map, just to tell you what a few of these things are, orange hawkweed, which grows up around Lolo Pass. And keep in mind, these are all points that we've located and then hand dug up and removed at the same time. The yellow points are meadow hawkweed. Dark green points are ivy and holly. And these hot pink points are shiny geranium. And then false brome, unfortunately, down all along the BPA power lines to the south of the watershed. So we do a lot of weeds, we do a lot of mapping, but I'm not going to cover that a ton. Although I did want to show you, we recently in the past few years have started mapping herb robert. And we do the like linear tracks. So what you'll see in this map is that the dark orange maps are super dense herb robert. The blue is a little bit lighter. Actually, the blue is light and the orange is medium. And all of the white areas or kind of off whitish areas, there is no herb robber. So we are trying to make a really concerted effort to basically go up to the upper parts of the watershed and get these little bits that are here and there so we can keep our kind of contiguous areas without herb robert in them in a large part of the watershed. Okay, first stop that we're going to take is Latourelle Prairie. And so you can see Larch Mountain is here, and Latourelle Prairie is kind of on the back side of Larch Mountain. It's a 100. It's about 120 acres, and it is actually a fen. It has fen and kind of wet meadow areas mixed in between, and it's the headwaters of the North Fork Bull Run River. This is like one of my favorite places on the earth. Well, except for the power lines, which of course BPA had to place right through the center, but we'll just ignore that in this. It's a really amazing place botanically. Here's a shot kind of, this is in one of the sphagnum moss kind of fen areas that has a lot of caltha and native sedges. There are extensive Myrica, sweet gale, thickets in some of these areas, and a number of different species of huckleberry. Also bog birch and some other very interesting things. So in the middle of these fen areas, you've got these little divots where, you have mats of sphagnum moss that, like, when you're standing on them, it's kind of like a waterbed, everything's sloshing around below you, and then you'll have a little divot, and you've got really nice emergent plants and aquatic plants like pond lilies. There's a bog bean, minianthe, um, and it's just a phenomenal spot. The water, and it's also, you can see how clear the water is. This is the headwaters of the drinking water for the city of Portland. So that's also comforting. And yeah, just some phenomenal plants up there. Shooting star, the bog bean is just phenomenal when it's blooming. Lousewort. We also have a pretty extensive, oh, that's not the next slide. Few other pictures first. Sundew, which I'm sure everyone in this room probably knows, is a carnivorous plant. There's lots of marsh marigolds, bog rosemary, and the cranberry, which is, this berry is like the size of my pinky nail, and the leaves are even smaller. So um, fascinating, fascinating flora up there. And I think the colors are one of the most spectacular things. There's a picture of some, I think that's vaccinium and not salix, and some sphagnum and some cranberry. And then just kind of a landscape, like the colors are really subtle, but it's phenomenal. One of the plants that we do a lot of work up in that prairie with weeds, because one of the things that happen is the very bottom of the prairie, there's a road crossing through just right adjacent to it. So all of the common hawkweed and oxeye daisy that's growing along the road, it's a corridor for those species to come in. So we've been hand pulling weeds out of this meadow for about 15 years, and trying to protect, the integrity of these rare plant populations. We have really strict, like, boot cleaning policies where we are only from the top end of the meadow, and then we come out the bottom and the weedy end, so that we're very conscious of like how we ourselves are moving things around. Um, in the last 3 years, we've been doing some population census work with for the Fritillaria Camp, and someone can correct me if I'm pronouncing this wrong. I never know. Campsicensis. Um, so we have had a group of people, and actually we look for skilled volunteers. So if anyone wants to join us and is willing to load up a quick capture on their phone, you can probably join us. But we kind of cordon off a little section of the prairie each year, and we upload this app on our phones where you can basically tap one button if you see a one leaf seedling, tap one button if you see a seedling without flowers, and then you tap another button if you see a flowering plant. And so we're taking a really detailed census of the areas that we're mapping. So that's been really interesting. Last year we had Forest Service, BLM, Clackamas and East Multnomah Soil and Water, um, and some volunteers as well. All right. So the thing that's really interesting about this fritillaria is you can see on this map from the consortium of Pacific Northwest Herbarium website that this population is one of the farthest south populations that's known. The other one I think is possibly Cascade Head. So it's a pretty interesting population, and it's a little bit disjunct from the populations north of us. Okay, so we can like lift up a bit. Here's Latourelle Prairie where we just were. And if you go a little bit northeast, you get these little meadows, and we call these the Township Meadows. And these are kind of overlooking, this is the Tanner Creek drainage, and you can see the fire scar from the Eagle Creek fire all through here. So these prairies in particular are interesting because these meadows, because they are east facing and they tend to get a lot of snow racked up in them from east winds in the wintertime. And I think that's my guess why there's not a lot of shrub cover in these meadows, and they're actually, kind of earlier in a succession than the Latourelle Prairie is. This is a plant that's in the carrot family, and you can see from this herbarium consortium voucher page that the next northern population from here is Mount Rainier National Park. So this population and the one that's over on the coast are pretty disjunct. So it's fascinating. And at the when I first realized this was here, I think it was Nick Otting came up and we went out. And since he has come up, we've surveyed a lot of the little prairies around the area and found quite a bit more of it. So that's been really interesting and fun. Okay, Walker Prairie. Um, Walker Prairie is just north of our Reservoir 2, which is the lower reservoir. And it doesn't look like much of a prairie in this photo. It's got a lot of um it does have some brush moving into it, and we've started trying to do some fall brushing on the site. But it's a pretty interesting place. There's lots of thermopsis. There's also a lot of delphinium, and the delphinium there's been kind of a topic of interest to a few people. Keith Carolee has been studying white delphinium up there for years because there's been questions as to whether it was Pavanaceum or Trolifolium. And he actually came out last year and did some pigment studies and essentially found um, that what is up there is actually an albino um, Delphinium trolifolium rather than Pavanaceum. So that was kind of interesting. He's got some interesting techniques that he's used to study pigment. I sorry that I cannot give you more detail about them right now. All right. And then Township Meadow. Sorry, this picture looks a little blurry. But Township Meadow is here's the reservoirs. Um, this is um, this is Bull Run Lake, and the Goodfellow Lakes are right in here. So Township Meadows just west of Goodfellow Lakes, and it's an interesting spot because there's been a lot of in the past, like in the 80s, I think the 90s was the last time that it was really surveyed by Carol Horvath, and I think Vern Martala was there, and possibly other people, but those are the names I've seen in the vouchers. So it's been quite some time that anyone's been up there, and um, what happened last in 2023 was the Camp Creek fire, and I'm going to talk about that a little bit in a second. But what happened was that they had to reopen some old roads. Um, Dominic Mays and I actually hiked out to Township Meadow about 12 years ago, and basically it took 4.5 hours each way to walk there. And by the time we got there, we were only able to stay for a half an hour and had to turn around and go back. So when they opened this road right here below Ashtoft Butte, um, we were able to hike in from this point instead of all the way over here. And we were able to get in there in about 3.5 hours. And we went up with the Forest Service botanist, Lin Chen, and it was spectacular. I was like, it was phenomenal. I couldn't even remember actually being there really the last time because it was so brief. Um, one of the most interesting things up there was that we found a huge patch of camas. And actually, this will probably be the room of people that would know, but the Forest Service botanist was telling me that he didn't know of any other populations on the Mount Hood. This is at about, trying to remember, I think it's at about like 2,200 feet. So it's kind of high. So it seems like it's an anomaly, and it's the first time that I've seen camas in the Bull Run watershed. Okay. Um, there was also a handful of other really interesting plants that we collected vouchers for last year, and um, I'm about to hand those over to the PSU herbarium very soon. Okay. As you know, the Bull Run has probably more of the region's old growth than a lot of areas. It isn't full of old growth because there was a really significant fire that burned through the Cedar Creek drainage. I'm trying to remember how long ago, but I can't remember. I'm sorry. There was a significant fire, so that, and then also there was a lot of logging, which I'm sure people are aware of, that went on until the 90s. But there are some really nice patches of old growth that are left. And one of the plants that we went to look for um, in 2023, right before the Camp Creek fire started, was the Crusia, or Streptopsis streptopoides. So we actually went back to revisit points of the species that were collected back in the 90s and hadn't been visited since. And we did locate it. My suspicion is that there's a lot more of this, and we've been trying to survey in some of these old growth pockets. And again, we're kind of on the south end of the range of this species. So it says a little bit of something. It's pretty interesting how all of these species occur in the Bull Run, and they're on the south end of the ranges. All right, so the other thing we've been working on the last couple years, in 2023, we had the Camp Creek fire. This is a post fire mortality map, and what you can see in this map is there's this 1210 road that cuts right through the middle of the fire. That's pretty much the main road corridor that was burned. So I worked with the Forest Service and kind of came up with a plan for doing the early detection rapid response, like weed control, as part of the burned area early. I'm sorry, I'm having a hard time remembering burned area emergency recovery funds. Anyway, that's probably not right. But anyway, so we basically, fortunately, had maps for all of the invasive species that were growing in these areas, so we knew exactly what to target and how to go about managing this task. One of the really heartbreaking things about the fire was that it was in a really large contiguous patch of old growth, and probably one of the more significant critical spotted owl nesting areas in the Bull Run. So saw quite a few of dead trees like these cedars and other species. And these pictures are from like April in the year post fire. Not too much coming up at that time, except for on the roadways. This picture is also from April. And what we saw almost immediately was that a lot of species that had been suppressed because this was very shaded prior to the fire were just raging back on the roadsides. So common hawkweed, Hericium lacanalii, foxglove, Scotch broom. Scotch broom probably hadn't grown on this road in decades because it was so shaded. Cat's ear, prickly lettuce, and a few other things. So part of our plan in these areas was to basically dig, and keep in mind we're hand digging this whole roadway, which is several miles. Our plan is to hand dig as things are flowering so that we're not allowing them to go seed, particularly with the composites, and let the seed blow into the adjacent forests. I was really worried about the common hawkweed. So here's another shot of April. You can see in this photo lots of little Scotch broom seedlings going, oh, yay, we've got some sun finally. But still lots of natives on the roadside as well. So we set off, I think maybe I took the slide out, but we set off on hand pulling, and we ended up hand digging with contractors and our staff about a cumulative of 35 miles of roadway, and almost completely did not let the um, common hawkweed flower um, in last year, which was 2024, and we're already at it again this year. Um, oh yeah, so some of the species that we found: the common hawkweed, tansy ragwort, and then wall lettuce, which wall lettuce is everywhere on the national forest and everywhere. It's just everywhere. One of the things that was interesting was the south side of the watershed was really, like I said before, it was pretty shaded. So there weren't a lot of like sun tolerant native species growing in those areas. So one of the things we did was went to about the approximate elevation on the other side of the watershed over by Latourelle Prairie, and we did a bunch of seed collection um, just to see what would happen. We collected some native thistle, some penstemons, some lupins, some Oregon sunshine, whatever we saw that had ripe seed while we were up there that was native. We collected and we dispersed on the other side of the watershed. So, okay, well, this is my last slide. So maybe I was talking really fast. That was really fast, but hopefully we can just have questions and conversation. So, who's our labor pool for invasive plant management? Um, we use we use reforestation contractors, and a lot of these guys also do wildfire work. They uh, a couple of them are like R&R restoration and mosaic ecology.